Okay, awesome. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our April meeting of the Pedestrian Transit Advisory Committee. I'm Alessandra. I have the deep honor of chairing this committee. I don't think our acting secretary, yes, here he is. Wow, so great. I'll give him a second to log on before we start roll call. You're gonna put him right on the spot. Christopher, I am so sorry to put you right on the spot, but I have heard tell that you are our acting secretary for tonight. Christopher, are you?
Yes, I'm here. Sorry. Sorry to be late. The Zoom didn't want to work on this computer for a second, so I got it to work.
Totally fine. I just wanted to make sure that you were ready to start taking minutes.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. So we will start with roll call. I'm just going to go through our PTAC members and then non-student guests because you'll all introduce yourselves as you start presenting. So starting with PTAC members, Ted Alexander is not here tonight. Ginny Alverson, I do not see. Caroline Bodiger.
Here.
Meredith Brown.
Here.
Laura Evans, I don't see. Christopher Ferry.
Here.
I see Vitor. Vitor, are you here?
Yes, I am. I think it's an important note. It's important to face the owl when talking. Otherwise, it's just very low. The volume is very low if you don't.
Okay, thank you, Vitor. Zach Rosenberg.
Here.
Alessandra Sider, myself, I'm here. And Carol Vigaris. Here. And our ex officio members, Willem Baugh as our city council rep, and I do not see him tonight. Kate White. Here. And Justin Schreiber is not here. Okay, so moving on to our non-student guests. I'll start with in-person folks, and you can just say your name, maybe your ward, and just a little bit about why you're here tonight. I'll start with Brad.
Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Rawson. I'm a Somerville resident, and I serve our city as Director of Mobility in Mayor Ballantyne's office. Thank you, as always, to our PTAC members, and thank you in particular to Carol and our student guests. We're super excited to have you all tonight.
Let's start along the back wall with you.
I'm David Kimler, father of one of the GSD students.
Amazing.
And I'm MJ Hample, his mother.
That's wonderful. Thank you for being here.
I'm Heather Hoffman. I'm from East Cambridge. I was so impressed at the way you conducted the last meeting that I thought I would come and make sure it wasn't a fluke. And also there was something that interested me on the agenda, but darned if I can remember what it is.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here again. Moving on to our online guests, just really quickly. When I say your name, and Carol, you have to help me identify who's not a student on the guest list. But when I say your name, Kate is gonna unmute you. You'll see a little pop-up on your screen that will prompt you to unmute, and when you do, then you can start talking.
The first two there are students, but I don't know when the two April.
Okay, how about whoever is calling on an iPhone? Might be hard for you to identify yourself. We might have to skip this person, but that's okay. Who's next, Carol?
The next student would be Mark. So there's.
Okay, Jake T, you're next.
Hello, I am the brother of one of the panelists.
Wow, amazing. Oh, I love how many family members are here. That's great. How about Joel Paul?
Yeah, I'm Joel. I live in Winter Hill. I was at the last two of these in person, but feeling a little under the weather, but glad that these are hybrid, so I can still participate.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And Leonard Vinnick.
Oh, crazy. Here. On Zoom.
Amazing. Thank you, Leonard. And how about Mark Phillip?
Mark Phillip is a student.
Oh, sorry.
Michael Whelan is a student at the first.
Okay. Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael. I live in Ward 2, just kind of seeing what's going on with this committee. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Michael. And you said Mark Phillip was here, Michael Whalen. Preston.
Hi, I'm a resident of Ward 5, so I'm here today because I'm particularly interested to hear what the panelists have to say on the Brown School area.
Awesome. Thank you for being here. Is Zach Tesler a student? Cool. So I think Suzanne is our last non-student guest.
Hi, this is Suzanne Wilkinson. I'm a ward member, Ward 6 resident. I'm a Safe Streets junkie. I belong to Somerville Alliance for Safe Streets and the Route 16 Traffic Calming Coalition. And I like coming to these meetings because I learn a lot.
Well, we love having you, Suzanne. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Alessandra.
Okay. And then Christopher, just to note, when the students introduce themselves, please add them to the roll call list. Okay, really quickly, let's talk about our March minutes. Does anybody have any proposed amendments to the minutes? Seeing none, I motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
Second.
Great. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, great. And it's approved. In the interest of time and knowing that our subcommittee updates are not very eventful most of the time, I'm just going to skip them and move right along to our presentations from our students. So I'm going to hand it to Carol to give a little introduction first.
Great, thank you so much. So thank you, Alessandra and PTAC for welcoming us today. So my name is Carol Vulgaris. I am Secretary of PTAC and also here in my capacity as the instructor of a course on planning for pedestrians and cyclists at the Harvard Graduate School of Design. This semester, the students in this course have been focused on safe routes to school. And the projects they've been working on have focused on how students reach 3 different school sites in Somerville. That's Brown School, the former, I guess, temporarily closed Winter Hill site on Sycamore Street, and the Edgerly Education Center, which is currently home to the Winter Hill School. I do want to really emphasize that as a Winter Hill parent, I am aware that there's a lot going on with these 2 schools, and these 2 sites were selected prior to a lot of the current conversations happening about school relocation and the state of the buildings. And so that's interesting background. The students in this class have learned some of that current context, but that wasn't really, it's an interesting coincidence. That wasn't the motivation for choosing these specific schools. I also want to say this was a learning exercise for these students. It's been an opportunity for them to hopefully balance kind of creative thinking with also plans and recommendations that might be somewhat grounded in reality. But when else but when you're a student, can you sort of push the limits of what might be easy to accomplish or might be feasible? So with that, I will hand it off to the students. I think they know the order that they're presenting with. I would ask each of you to introduce yourself before jumping in. And each team of students is gonna present for about 10 minutes, and there'll be 3 or 4 minutes for questions or comments or feedback in between. It'll be 5, is this right? 5 different teams, and so we're gonna keep sort of moving at a clip. But I think the first team is going to be Michael and that one. Awesome.
So if you want to so my name is Michael Whelan. And if you want to make me so I can present, yes, great. Let me share screen. This. Okay, so can you introduce yourself?
Hi, it's nice to meet you everyone, and I'm Tawan, second year doctoral student at Harvard GSD. Very nice to meet you. Great to be here.
And like I said, my name is Michael Whelan, and I'm a second year Master of Urban Planning student at the GSD. So our project was focused on safe routes to school mapping. The city of Somerville has existing safe routes to school maps, but we were looking at sort of investigating these maps, thinking about in the context of everything we learned this semester, in addition to the work that other people are doing in the course, how we could potentially make some really great safe routes to school maps. So I think one of the things I've learned at the GSD is that it's good to just sort of lead with what you're going to be talking about, show people this is what we're going to be explaining. So this is an example of one of the maps that we've created. This is for the Edgerly Education Center campus. And I'll get into it a little bit more, but I just wanted to sort of show up front some of the routes that we've created. But first I want to talk about the existing maps that the city of Somerville uses for its Safe Routes to School program. So these maps take what I'm calling an inventory approach. So they essentially depict sort of the entire urban geography around each school site. And they have traffic lights, crosswalks, bus stop locations, all of the streets where the speed limit is set to 20 miles an hour or lower are highlighted in green in this case. Crosswalks are noted. However, I would note that the current maps lack the community path, which is obviously a very important asset for safe routes to school. And you can see specifically in this case for Edgerly, they've also added the Otis Street footbridge and the Gilman Street underpass, recognizing these sort of key pieces of unusual infrastructure that are very important for the safe route to school there. And they use aerial photography as the base. So our this approach is very good at providing like an inventory overview, but it isn't really getting at like routes to school, right? And so that's really kind of where we wanted to come in. And so here are sort of the principles that our team was aiming at when we went on this sort of map, oh my gosh, this map quest, if you will. So we wanted to depict actual routes to the school. We wanted to include origin points. We wanted these to be routes where students could join along the way if they weren't like right at the origin point itself. And places where you could activate them as a community and as like a bike bus or a walking school bus. Generally for the origin points, we're focusing on sites of local interest, particularly those which kids would already know about, like playgrounds. And we're really focusing on low stress routes. If like we couldn't find one, we're not kind of saying this is the best, we're just sort of not depicting it. Dewan will talk a little bit more about this idea of points of care or like hazards. And also on the basis of a great suggestion from Nor, we've added the city's recent initiative to create neighborways. And then some avoidance of hills if possible, but sometimes in Somerville that is impossible. So Dewan is going to talk a little bit about this idea of like points of care.
So the points were located in the circle are points of care. So here are some yellow triangles. They mean they are the points where the fatal crash happened previously, and the plus signs are the points where we need extra care because they are at busy intersections. And the circle points at the bottom is the point where existing crossing guards are at. So we obviously have that crossing guards existing right now.
And so these are locations where we're sort of avoiding as we go and create these routes.
So well, in the map, the trees means the parts where we started our routes, and We try to avoid as many as points of care as we can because it could be dangerous for kids or children to walk or bike or walk or cycling, so.
Thanks, Ron. So I'm gonna talk about the map that we created for Edgerly. So let's start with the gathering places. So as Dewan was pointing out, there actually is quite a great inventory of parks and open spaces around the area. So for the walking school buses, sort of going from, I guess, sort of the top down. So Chucky Harris Park is located just across the Broadway from Edgerly, and so that's sort of origin point one. You can see we identified the bike share station at the lower left-hand corner of Foss Park as another point. And you can see as well that we have the Marshall Street Playground where we are right now, the Somerville Public Library, as well as Symphony Park. And I'm actually gonna just go into the map PDF itself so I can sort of zoom in a little bit because I think it's a little bit unclear. So one of the things, because we're thinking about, these are maps that we want kids to be able to use, you can see that we've added sort of interesting icons noting, oh, there's like an alley here that you go through and you pass through the Otis Street Playground. So making it something that like kids can actually reference when they're on their way to school to know these routes. So let me just go back into my sorry here. Having maps on slides. And then in this case, the bike locations are pretty similar. So I'll go through that in the interest of time. One thing I wanted to note about Edgerly specifically, so we know that there's been a lot of growth in Somerville in the Assembly Square area, and then there's also the Ten Hill neighborhoods. This is kind of getting to what I was saying about how we didn't necessarily depict routes if we just couldn't figure out a like relatively straightforward and highly protected route to a location. So there is an underpass under the highway that goes over to Assembly Square, but to get there, you have to sort of skirt around the parking lot of a large grocery store. We looked at that. It does not really have fantastic sidewalk conditions, and you have to cross a frontage road on the highway. So you can see we've added in dotted lines here. The dotted green line is like what could be potentially a future bike route if interventions were put in place. You could also create some contraflow bike lanes in the neighborhood kind of to the left of Foss Park. And that would allow you to create a very sort of neighborhood way-esque route to the Ten Hills neighborhood. And now Dewan's gonna talk about Winter Hill.
So, Winter Hill is not working as a school right now at this moment right now, but we thought it would be great if we can suggest walking or cycling routes for children to take a school bus there. So we just separated walking routes and cycling routes because they are different. They need different conditions. So these are the gathering points, gathering places for walking buses routes. We have 5 suggestions for walking. And for bike trains, we have another 5 suggestions for gathering places.
One thing I'd point out here as well is like the leveraging of the community path, which is a great asset for these kinds of routes. And then finally, Brown. So this school is very like embedded in the neighborhood, which makes for some interesting routes. There's also some great sort of landmarks and gathering places where we were able to very sort of easily identify this would be a place that would really be good for kids to gather if they're going to be walking to school. So Nathan Tufts Park, where the famous Powder House is, you can see I've added an icon on the map for that. One of the things that Carol has pointed out is that parents sometimes will be on their way to catch the red line into work. So we've created at that sort of plaza by the Davis Station busway. That's one of our gathering points. And then as well, the George the Giraffe and Big Poppy sculpture along the community path. And you can see here, I'm gonna go over to my zoomed in version again, you can see some of the icons we've added to just try to make this, you know, a sort of a useful document, but also, if this loads, come on, there we go. But also a fun document. So there we have George and their copy. Sorry, again, with the Acrobat issues. So thank you. Those are our maps. Yeah, happy to take any questions or discussion.
I have a quick starting question. Is your final product like a map of the entire city or kind of zoomed in for each individual school?
So we have, like, it's coming out of Illustrator and there's like artboards basically, but the Brown and Edgerly maps are in an Illustrator file together. And we could overlay the Winter Hill maps as well.
Oh, but I think the question was, is the map for each school, does it just show the immediate vicinity around the school? Or is it, for example, is there a map for Brown that shows where people would like, that would show routes from throughout Somerville, or are you focused on the area immediately around each school?
Because right now our Safe Routes to School maps, correct me if I'm wrong, mobility, but they are like more zoomed in than, you know, the entire city, for example.
We're a little more zoomed out than the existing maps in general, but we're not at the whole city level. I think with the origin points, we wanted to make sure that we were close enough to the school where there's a critical mass where it actually would make sense for kids to gather there. Whereas like, if it was so far away, there might only be like 1 or 2 students coming from that street. And so then, yeah, so that's kind of the level of zoom that we have.
Cool. Thank you. Questions, either online or in person? Did you have a question?
I do, about contraflow bike lanes. Speaking as a non-Somerville resident and a non-biker, how much experience does Somerville have with them? And, because I have, there aren't a lot of them in Cambridge. They're proposing more. The ones that I've seen that actually exist, I don't have a problem with. I would never cross the street in Harvard Square without looking both ways twice. So that doesn't bother me, but there are other places where I think it's extremely dangerous because people wouldn't expect bikes going both ways right there. So I was just wondering, what experience does Somerville have?
Maybe a mobility question.
Sure. Thanks, Alessandra. Happy to answer this question, but I would welcome any feedback from PTAC members as well. Somerville has a lot of experience working on streets that are one way for driving, but 2-way for people biking. In Somerville, we call them neighborways, which is an outgrowth of a community-based organizing process that focuses on public art, wayfinding signage, and traffic calming, all geared towards providing useful links, right? Not just recreation for recreation's sake, but connecting people to places like this, our civic nerve centers, our cultural nerve centers like library, high school, transit connections, grocery, health. The 2 most historic ones in Somerville are actually in the East Somerville neighborhood, connecting it over here. So I'd actually love to ask Michael and Dwan, would you mind going back to your map real quick so we can just show folks? You talked about that Gilman Street underpass. Gilman Street is one of the oldest Somerville neighborhoods. And so I'm pleased to see that it shows up on this map. On the far left there's a little teal color.
Yeah, so we've done them in teal. You can see on Gilman, you can see there's some teal right underneath on Gilman there, but we've also, because it is a neighborway, we've also made it one of our walking and cycling routes. Yeah, and during our site visit, by the way, I should add that in addition to Edgerly students, we saw high school students walking the other way during dismissal time. So it's clearly like being used for that purpose. Yeah.
Now, one more point to Heather's question. There are specific design criteria that cities around North America have used. Portland and Seattle and Vancouver are well-known, well-celebrated industry leaders in this space, but Somerville is too. So low-volume streets are selected intentionally, not higher volume streets, right? It's really important that we have what, Kate, like 200 cars per hour at the maximum or something like that?
It's actually even less than 50 at a peak time
Yeah.
per hour, not 2,000 throughout the whole day.
Because we're really trying to normalize walking, rolling, and biking in the street. But we also really emphasize the intersections, right? You might have a low volume, low stress roadway and street, but then when you actually reach the cross connections, those arterial or higher volume streets, it's really important to make sure that turning vehicles are moving slowly, the sight lines are good. And again, sounds like you all have been doing site visits and you've probably seen some of that evidence in places like the Edgerly and the East Somerville Community School neighborhoods. So Somerville's documenting all of this stuff. We're quickly expanding these programs and we're connecting the dots with the national and international best practice. National Association of City Transportation Officials is about to release its first update to its urban bikeway design guide in the last decade. And this type of low volume back street connection will feature in that design guide. So it's really fun that we're all learning from each other around the world.
Thanks, Brad. I think in the interest of time, we should move on to the next group. But thank you guys so much.
Yeah, so you can let me share. I'm Zach Tessler, and I'll be working with my partner.
Okay, I have asked to promote you.
Okay, great. So again, I'm Zach, and is this? Great.
Oh, no, you wouldn't be. The mic is picking up from here.
Cool. Shay, you want to
Yeah.
say something?
I am Sheila and I'm my first year master in urban design student at the GSD.
I'm a second year master urban planning student at the GSD, and we're going to be talking about school streets today. So the mission of the project, the desire among Somerville students and parents to socialize with one another around drop-off and dismissal hours exceeds what the public realm can currently safely support. As students and parents seek to mix and mingle, forming a social fabric much greater than the sum of its parts, instead of being embraced by the street, they are squeezed onto and sometimes off of narrow sidewalks without ample room to linger and connect. How can the built environment instead work to foster community and invite diverse users to play, to interact, or just to relax? And this is a sort of preview of what we'll be proposing, the school streets that Shay has made such an awesome rendering of here. So what are school streets? These are car-free areas outside schools. They fall on a spectrum of temporary to permanent, so sometimes they last only during pickup and drop-off hours, and sometimes they take place during the whole school day or all the time. They can consist of simple low-cost elements such as barriers and simple paint or even artistic paint on the street, or much more permanent furniture and street elements, and can result in much more rationalized pickup and drop-off spaces, as well as encouraging active transportation modes to school. Some of the benefits of school streets: they encourage socializing and play, both among children and parents. They encourage active modes of transportation to school, some of that walking, rolling, skating, scooting we were just talking about. They provide space to linger and even to rest. This can be really important, particularly thinking of Somerville's hilly topography. They can ease congestion and emissions around school properties, particularly given some of the mode shifts that can occur towards more active modes of transportation, and again, enhancing safety for all users, but really for children in particular. So what is the problem that we notice? There's not enough sidewalk space currently to accommodate some of the socializing and incidental interactions that can take place, particularly around school pickup and drop-off hours. At the Edgerly in particular, students would greatly benefit from some expanded play space, given that there's not currently such a formal playground at the site. Some of the indicators we looked into, we can see that there's some unsafe overcrowding off, with a heel dangling off the curb at the Winter Hill School here on the right. Vehicular speeds that are too high for children to be navigating streets safely on their own, which they really should be able to do around schools, and sidewalks that are pretty narrow for accommodating socializing. Some of the goals of the project, we're hoping that school streets in Somerville could be safe and comfortable, playful and educational, and socially catalytic. And we see three pretty diverse examples here in urban settings in Brussels, Los Angeles, and Berlin. Some of the different indicators for the project, we were quite inspired by these Gale urban quality criteria we're flashing on the left, which really speak to the experience of place and placemaking, thinking of, are there opportunities for sitting, opportunities to see and be seen, and then some of the different indicators that correspond to the goals of the project. So are we noticing an increase in foot traffic, a reduction in traffic speeds? How long are children and adults lingering and socializing with one another, and how many new connections are they making? So these are some of the indicators that we could kind of evaluate the success of the project with. And I'll kick it over to Shay for some context and get into the intervention.
Yeah, so we were looking at Brown School as a pilot intervention. And the streets that we observed have more pedestrian flow and are across the community path, Willow and Cater. So we center our attention in these streets. Next one, please. This is zooming into like the streets that are around Brown School. And these are the existing conditions that we have on the next one. And our approach, what we propose is this segment that is highlighted in yellow to make it a restricted vehicular access. So it won't have access to cars during pickup and drop-off hours. And next one. And this is the main approach that or the proposal that we have. And the next one. And it kind of looks like this, but we want to take you step by step so we can see what are the strategies that we are applying here. So our first goal, as Zach mentioned, is to make it safe and comfortable. So for this, we are proposing the improvement of the crossings that can lower the vehicular speed thanks to bulb outs and raised intersections. We are also proposing designated areas for pickup and drop off. And also we think that protected bike lane could be useful, that could carry people from the community path and take them to Brown, the next one. We also want to make this street playful and educational. So we want to reclaim space from private vehicles to offer space to integrate play and learning for children next to the school. And the next one. And finally, we wanted to make a socially catalytic project. So we are providing seating and street furniture, and also that can have or that can bring opportunities for people to bring, for example, parents where they are dropping off their children or they are picking them up. They have a nice space to just sit and talk to each other. Next one. So these are just some zoom-ins of the different sectors that we are proposing. So this is the crossing, the cross with Willow and Cater. And here we can see that we want to make a raised crosswalk, but also provide the bulb outs that can control the speed around this area. And also they announced that something is changing in this street, like that pedestrian street is coming. And the next one. This is like the part in the middle of the street in front of the school. And what we are proposing here is having some seating areas in front of the school, so parents can wait seated there. But also we are proposing parking spots for bikes, because we have seen that some of the parents don't have proper space to park their bikes, so they can have more comfortable space to just park them and have a nice meeting area around. On the next one. And this is the other crossing. We are also proposing it to be raised. We have another parking space in this area. For example, if parents want to drop their bike here and walk around this pedestrian street, which could be also nice for them. So this is like the main approach we are proposing for the street. And this is like a before and after of what we are thinking this could happen, how this could happen, and how we can make this street more safe, comfortable, playful, and educational, and socially catalytic. Well, for a quick bill intervention, we think that we can do something very cheap, maybe to test how things would go if we have this as a pedestrian street and have like some furniture or paint in the streets, so we can test this in a smaller scale.
Okay, gonna try to wrap this up really quickly. Just wanted to point to a few different visual examples of how this could look across different timescales. So we see on the left some solutions that could go in as little as a few weeks, and on the right, some solutions that are much more carefully designed and really here to stay in terms of creating school streets. Some of the logistical thoughts that would involve such a project. What's really nice about a school street is that it's really easy to test out. So using just volunteers, a pilot could see the school street closed just during drop off and pickup times, perhaps for a week. If that goes well, closing them for the full school day, letting kids play during recess and at lunchtime, and see how that goes. And next, maybe implementing it for a semester for half of the school year, and really calling that a test period to see how folks react before doing a full rollout. So really an incremental approach. In terms of staffing and funding, that would be a really nice opportunity for making some kind of community connections among PTA volunteers and school volunteers. A more robust strategy would involve using crossing guards, which a conservative estimate would cost maybe $384 or so per school street per day. And just wanted to point to the Massachusetts Shared Streets and Spaces grant program, which might be able to provide funding for such an initiative. Some of the potential harms, there could be some inconvenience to drivers, parents and non-parents who need to divert their route or could encounter some traffic from people learning a new traffic pattern. There could be noise from play that maybe could be disruptive if someone has a home office or so on the street, and additional parking and loading issues for residents. And yeah, just pointing to the future of Brown, while we know sadly it's unclear that Brown will remain a school, Shay and I feel strongly that the children of Somerville deserve a street environment that is safe, comfortable, and dare I say fun to get them to whatever this site will be. So thank you, and with that, we invite your questions.
The comment from Preston, which I'm happy to read. The intersection of Kidder and Willow is already raised. Would this be proposing changes to how it's currently set up? If so, what is the concern with current implementation?
Yeah, we acknowledge that it's actually raised, but what we are proposing on top of that are the bulb outs. So it's a bigger intervention that takes that into account, but just enhances the walkability around the area. So it's just like complementing what it's already there.
Other questions? I have a question about just other like precedent for closing down a street during pickup drop-off times. Did you see kind of that sort of program in other cities around the country or around the world?
Yeah, so actually there's a street in my hometown that happens to be closed, I think 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. So that's a school street that I always sort of took for granted growing up, but certainly there are precedents around. We found more precedents, and certainly with more kind of programming and more street furniture and such throughout Europe. But even in Cambridge and in the area, there are certainly precedents for this. Yeah.
Yeah, and especially in Paris, like they have this approach that is very pedestrian friendly, and they have like a whole program of school streets. So they started doing like these pilots that they became permanent projects. So it's been done and a lot of cities are doing it. So we wanted to think what would happen if this is done in Somerville.
We have a question from Suzanne. Brown is a playground that you don't utilize. Is there a reason for that?
I think it certainly would be utilized. The school street is more providing additional space, both for play maybe during school hours, but really emphasizing pickup and drop off times and allowing space really on the street for parents and students to mix and mingle and connect with one another.
Yeah, right.
Team, great job. Question I'd like to ask is, early in your site assessments, did you consider other routes, the east-west or the north-south? I heard you say clearly that the community path connection was a really important network element of your thinking. The city has made some changes over the years on both Kidder and Josephine, and Highland Road, just one block to the east, is also specifically identified in our bicycle network plan as a neighborhood treatment. So could you just give us a tiny bit more on your selection of Willow, which is a higher volume street, as opposed to some of those other lower volume ones?
Oh, yeah, what we saw is the routes that people take, usually not only the car flow, but also the pedestrian flow. Yeah, it's easier to take that route, and it also connects directly to the community path. So people will always prefer to also choose that road. So that's the reason why we prioritize this street. But what we also wanted to emphasize is the strategies that we are applying that could be adapted to other areas. And then testing becomes very important to see what would happen if we actually close this street, or if it doesn't work, what other alternatives we have. So it's not like a fixed proposal, but something that can be adapted to.
Great. Thank you so much. Who is our next presenter?
Oh, Brianna.
So we'll go ahead and get started. So hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming out. My name is Brianna.
I'm Evan Kindler.
Juliana. And today we're going to be talking about the Broadway corridor. So just a quick roadmap for our presentation. We're going to be going over Broadway's importance, potential interventions, our methods for our site selection, going over the Broadway corridor a little more granularly, highlighting the city's ongoing efforts, and then giving a whole summary. So we wanted to start by acknowledging that Broadway is a key link throughout our three schools. So these are Brown, Edgerly, Winter Hill. It's also a key connector for the combined Trump Field School that might be happening that has a Broadway address. So on the GIF here on the side, this is basically a simulation that we learned to do throughout our course, and it's cycling through each of the schools. And what we want to highlight here is how Broadway lights up all throughout the three schools, and how that narrowed down why we wanted to focus on Broadway. So it is a key link, but it can serve students better. So we pulled some quotes from surveys that we got through our course, specific to safe routes to school and how parents, caretakers, and students are getting to school. I won't read them all, but for example, the first one, it says, "It can be dangerous as cars go fast and cut into the bus and bike lanes." So the interventions that you'll see us deploy throughout our sites include ramps, raised crosswalks and sidewalks, increased crossing times at key intersections, and curb bump outs. And I'll just make a quick note that most of our interventions focus on the pedestrian experience, but we did give some thought to what possible bike interventions could be. So this included the utilization of flex posts and protected bike lanes, as well as raising bike lanes when they're not part of the bus lane, and moving the bike lane against the curb when possible. And so kind of our methodology for the interventions and our site selection. So we did a lot of desktop mapping. So it's like, what publicly accessible data do we have? Most importantly, it relied a lot on our site visits. So this was basically us ground truthing the conditions along Broadway, and then also pulling from survey responses.
And so here we have a map at the Somerville scale of our sites, and we're defining the Broadway corridor as a 2.3 mile stretch between Powder House Circle and the I-93. And Broadway within Somerville does extend more northwest, but just given the route set those schools students will be taking, we've decided to focus more on that middle bit. And yeah, we can go to the next one. So zooming in a little bit more to the corridor, there are some important points that we decided to look at. So on the very west, we have Powder House Circle, then Boston Ave, the Lagoon Square, Methodist Street intersection, Main Street and McGrath Highway, and then I-93. And the schools can also be seen here as Brown, Winter Hill and Edgeley. And we just wanted to highlight here also that between Powder House Circle and a bit past Lagoon Square, Medford borders Somerville. So we considered the north-south crossings a little bit less just because we were assuming that Medford students wouldn't be going down into the Somerville district schools. We did just want to highlight that Somerville's already has some great ongoing efforts to make Broadway a more complete street, which has obvious sort of positive implications for active school travel. So they've worked on the Winter Hill in Motion, Central Broadway redesign project, Vision Zero Somerville. Yeah. So we decided to focus a little bit more on the intersection that deserve a little bit more love and attention. So we're going to start at Lagoon Square. As you can see here, there's a slip lane, which kind of encourages cars to go very fast around the corner, which can be detrimental for pedestrians crossing as well as cyclists. So what we propose is bumping out that corner to encourage cars to make a slow turn, as well as raising the crosswalk to prioritize pedestrian crossing safety. Moreover, this intersection would also have modern ramps. So here we have a street view of this intersection, and we also noticed that people were crossing irregardless of the traffic signal, most likely due to long wait times. And so when you have the intersection, yeah, you can do the next one. So with a curb bump out and a raised crosswalk, as I mentioned earlier, we're hoping to prioritize pedestrian safety as cars will have to slow down as they approach this corner. And so we can do a quick build made of sturdy plastic, which can be implemented to test this intervention out. And then if all goes to plan, this can be made a permanent curb bump out with modern ramps and raised crosswalks, which can be implemented.
Now shifting our focus to the main intersection with Broadway, we can see on the next slide that there is a variety of different things that we found upon our site visit. First, we noticed that this pole was shiny and new and pointing the wrong way, which a neighbor kindly informed us was because people kept running into it, and so it kept having to be replaced. You can also see that the ramps here are not modernized and do not have bumps to give sort of the tactile feel to people that they're entering the street. The current conditions, as you can see on the far right, require bus and cars to cross the bike lane in order to get into the right turn lane. This then happens again when buses re-enter traffic on the far left, crossing the bike lane. There's also a slip lane that allows cars to speed through this intersection, which the pole was located that was continually hit. Our intervention suggestions include moving the bike lane to the curb to avoid this conflict, installing modern ramps along all of the various points in the intersection where pedestrians are entering the street, a curb bump out here, which changes the angle of the turn so that drivers are forced to slow down in order to make it. And this also helps us by shortening the distance that pedestrians need to cross the street. This is what the intersection currently looks like when you're standing in the median in between the main intersection of Broadway. And this is what we envision it could potentially look like. Focusing here on the fact that these flex posts could be quickly installed again, simply with the yellow plastic curb bump out, giving visibility to this, new intervention and a cheap, quick, easy way to do it. More permanently, those flex posts could be converted into something more pleasing on the eye, such as a planter, and instead of having this plastic, replacing it with concrete.
So finally, we're gonna move on to the McGrath intersection. So we looked at the site, and we wanted to look at what the uses were at each of these corners. So 3 of the 4 corners are like a combination of Dunkin' Donuts and gas stations. This is really important because it's a lot of throughfare for cars, so you have a lot of high volume entries and exits. And especially with the speed that cars are going at on McGrath, it can make for slow reaction times when pedestrians are in the crossings. Each of these has a refuge median, so if you don't make it all in one go, you can be crossing somewhere between 6 to 8 lanes. We also wanted to note Foss Park on this end, so it's one of the more beloved parks, so you get a lot of children as well as caretakers coming to the park, so they will have to interact with this intersection at some point, most likely. For our interventions here, we're proposing to increase the crossing times on both of these, as well as raising the crosswalks. Most importantly, there is another slip lane here where drivers slip onto McGrath, has very high speed, so we're proposing to bump this out, getting rid of the slip lane. So here again is just more of a human scale on what those conditions look like. So this is one of the gas stations, and you can see high volume exit, high volume entries. While we were there, someone saw us pointing and talking about the street, and they were like, "Do you guys work for the city?" We said, "No, we're students." And they offered up some of their own observations. So it was this person here saying McGrath is really busy and chaotic. So another thing we noticed is that people were running across the crosswalks to try to make it, and there was hesitancy when going. So due to volume and it was a really overwhelming intersection. It's also really loud. So a quick build intervention could include raising the crosswalks using the sturdy plastic ones, as well as increasing the crossing time. And then the more permanent intervention for this is then incorporating asphalt raised crosswalks and maintaining the increased crossing time.
So some measures of success that we wanted to focus on, we think most importantly is probably parents' comfortability with their children for the safe route to school. Do they feel comfortable walking on the street with their children, and ideally as they grow older, allowing children to walk on their own? Quantitatively, we also thought that you can measure the pedestrian volume, again, ideally children, a reduction in noise levels, and for McGrath specifically, a reduction in speed.
And this is just a summary slide of our considerations, research, our map, and then our interventions for y'all to look at. Thank you.
Questions? Yeah. Well, first of all, this last intersection I'm extremely familiar with. Because my kid lives in Winterville, close to Foss Park, and I live in East Cambridge, and so I go through that a lot. And I've also spent time in Foss Park. And so I have crossed it on foot many times, and for what it's worth, I'm fearless crossing that. Nothing bad has ever happened. So, but it doesn't mean you can't make it better. I have a question about the, moving the bike lanes to the curb where you have a bus lane. How do you deal with the bus stops?
So we've thought about this a lot, where you will have that potential conflict with a person trying to enter the bus, rather than, while there is this sort of raised bike lane. I think the solution there, partially in my eyes, is that I'd rather have that conflict than a person on the bike getting hit with the bus. And so that sight line is much clearer. And so my hope is that people on the bike would see people entering the bus and stop. This would also, raising the bike lane along the curb would allow for a level boarding on the bus, ideally making it more accessible to all bus patrons.
Well, I would like to offer to you a comment from a friend of mine who's legally blind. And her comment on the way in square works. There's actually a strip. The bike lane is more or less part of the sidewalk. And then there's a strip, and then there's the bus stop there. And her observation is that it is incredibly dangerous for her as a person with impaired vision. Especially when the bus doesn't use the bus stop. Now, the bus stop in Union Square actually has a good bit of pavement before you get to the bike lane. But when the bus stops and she gets out right by the bike lane, she's almost been hit many times. And she has, she's really adamant about this. So I would suggest strongly that people talk to people with limited or no vision about what this experience is like. She also said that people with strollers and people with walkers or other mobility devices are in danger when there's not enough room to kind of situate yourself before you find yourself in the bike lane. So
something that
this is probably why I needed to come today.
something that I don't think we maybe went into enough detail on in our presentation or the drawings was we thought a lot about well, first off, thank you for the comment. But
channeling my friend.
Yeah. We thought a lot about the difference in like texture of the street. So kind of, if you're walking in a pedestrian safe area, there should be a different texture that you're feeling on the ground. Additionally, with the modernization of ramps, having those bumps is really important if you can't see to know that you're entering into a car area. So our idea for said bus stop would be having this, change in texture to, allow everyone to realize, this is that they're entering this sort of zone of potential conflict. But yeah, great points.
Well, but it's not just knowing that, it's that there needs to be enough room so that you can wait for the bus or get off the bus without finding yourself immediately in the bike lane. And, as someone who had cataract surgery just a few months ago and had to cross Mount Auburn Street with no vision. That's the one time I'm not fearless, when I can't see what's going on. So, remember that a blind person may well have a cane, and so that's sticking out way in front of them. So, and if that, that endangers the bike, it also endangers the person who's got the cane because it gets clipped. So those are just things to think about for really important logistics.
I definitely hear you. I think the other interesting thing is thank goodness there are design guidelines also therefore for how wide bus stops should even be. Actually taking strollers quite often of the sort of the baseline standard in mind. So I think that would be okay, but I definitely hear you in terms of stepping out onto the bike lane. I think, so I'm coming from a Dutch context. Yeah. Very different. I think it's also just a mind shift change in general, where we're getting used to cyclists being more prevalent on the street. The cyclists also themselves getting used to being on the street more often. And that also over time gradually reduces conflict. I think we're still very much like the youth stages here of people just being used to bikes even on the street. So I think that's also a different element of things too.
Well, and bikes getting used to, having to watch out for other people, like, I don't know, pedestrians. That's, I mostly do not have a problem with that, but I know too many people who do.
Yeah.
And I'm probably just a really assertive one.
Thank you so much for this. This is really important discussion. I am eager to get to the next,
Thank you, Carol.
to keep the next presentation going. I think we have 2 more.
Yes.
So now for example.
Yes.
So Mark.
Mark. Or Philip.
Okay, so hello, my name is Mark, and
I'm Moyet.
so I will be taking you through our proposal for Medford Street. And then afterwards, Tomoyuki is gonna jump in to explain why the intervention was necessary. So this stretch of Medford Street sidewalk would be an important pedestrian zone to consider upgrading after Winter Hill has been renovated. The proposal aims to improve the perceived safety by increasing the clear width of the sidewalk of Medford Street adjacent to Winter Hill School and St. Anne Church from 4 feet to 10 feet, in addition of 6 feet. This would be done by replacing the parallel parking zone along the link with a sidewalk made of mountable curbs and water permeable interlock pavers. The expansion of the sidewalk is a traffic calming measure that attempts to reduce the perceived width of the vehicular throughway. As a result, we expect general reduction in car speeds along the link, making it safer for both pedestrians and cyclists alike. A buffer of planters and seats would be added within a furnishing zone to further enhance the safety of children pedestrians, as shown in the GIF here. Additionally, we can also add some aromatic trees to enhance the pedestrian experience and so on. So the intervention aimed to become an innovative way to vary the clear width of the sidewalk in response to pedestrian demand. The image here shows the current state of the street with a sidewalk comprising of a clear width of 4 feet and a furnishing zone of 2 feet. So moving on, the image here shows the state of the street during non-peak hours after the sidewalk expansion has been constructed. During these hours, cars are expected to park on the sidewalk extension area marked by the warm color pavers. The limited 2-hour parking will continue to be enforced. This solves the issue of not losing the parking area while increasing the clear width of the sidewalk to 6 feet up from 4. The final image here shows the state during peak hours. Cars are not allowed to mount the sidewalk. Optionally, movable furniture could be utilized to block cars from parking, resulting in a clear pedestrian width of 10 feet and improving the level of service and the pedestrian level of traffic stress of the link to a children-friendly rating. And when it comes to the furniture, we propose that these public furniture could be moved daily by school staff members on rotation or volunteers. In non-peak hours, the benches would be moved next to the planter for a more seamless look. And an essential aspect of this proposal as well is to actively involve the community in enhancing the street safety around the school. So one strategy would be a public furniture making workshop designed to educate students on street safety, but also with working alike. The initiative is expected to produce distinctive, lightweight street furniture, such as wooden planters and benches. The practice, of course, is recognized globally. It's an opportunity for community members to tap into their creativity, but also for local businesses to contribute to the city's infrastructure by sponsorship, partnerships, or an advisory capacity. Notable examples are the Down City Design After School program in Providence and the Ishinomaki Labs workshop in Japan. In both examples, school students built and deployed urban furniture that aim to enrich everyday life of the community.
Here, we'd like to explain why we are focusing on Medford Street in our proposal. Yes, Medford Street is an urban arterial running from southeast to northwest at the edge of Somerville. Medford Street is adjacent to the Winter Hill School, so the street is one of the important parts of the pedestrian and bicycle network for the students. However, on Medford Street, thousands of vehicles travel each day, many of them running faster than 25 mph, and with a traffic peak just in the commuting time in the morning. So that means students are getting to school are always exposed on the significant risk from cars on Medford Street. Survey results of parents with Winter Hill School students also shows us their high concerns, especially about the traffic on Medford Street. And this is the reason why we are focusing on Medford Street. So, as a network completeness analysis for pedestrian and bicycle networks identified some segments to be improved, our proposal is intervening the specific segments adjacent to the school district. As we presented earlier, our primary goal is to provide a safe, stress-free space for children by reducing traffic and parking demands on the street, increasing the width of the sidewalk, and allocating an appropriate buffer zone between pedestrians and vehicles. We also aim to provide a space for other people, such as people with disabilities and older people, to coexist in harmony with children in the street as the secondary goal. This is a kind of tactical improvements with a small intervention focusing on just one segment, but it's also designed to be easily expanded. Like once the intervention process proves successful, we anticipate this effort to be expanded to other segments of Medford Street or other school districts in Somerville. To make sure we can achieve goals, we'll use some indicators to quantitatively monitor the effectiveness of our efforts during and after the intervention. In intervention phase before Winter Hill School rehabilitation, we set level of traffic stress, LTS, and level of service, LAS, as our design target. LTS scores for bicycle and PLTS scores for pedestrian could be used to confirm whether the street is appropriately designed stress-free for users. Here, this intervention aims to meet the highest score of 1, where children can also use the segments without stress. We also use LOS score to confirm the expecting quality of traffic service, aiming to highest score of A to ensure stable free flows of pedestrians and cyclists. After the school rehabilitation process, and as the school comes back to in use, we will continuously monitor the effects of our intervention based on the 3 metrics from surveys. The number of students who choose to walk or bike, and the pedestrians and bicycle counts for children at Medford Street will be used to see if children and their parents change their preference to their commuting route after the intervention. And we also use the number of issued on-street parking permits to confirm the intervention can reduce the demand for on-street parking, which is also a part of our objectives.
So with any something new being added to the city, there could be some harms, and here's some countermeasures. First is the parking management during peak hours to address the increased parking demand. When on sidewalk parking is restricted during peak hours, we propose that the city could lease some parking spaces from Saint Anne Church or the Youth with a Mission Worship House in Sycamore Street. This does not only compensate for the lost parking space, but also provide additional income for either entities. In addition, we can also talk about traffic calming measures. If the average car speed along the lane does not decrease, maybe you can add some additional traffic calming measures such as rumble strips and so on. So if the proposal itself is structured as a pilot project that can be adapted to many areas, there are two possible outcomes. Either it's fully absorbed or it's partially or not absorbed at all. So if the project is fully absorbed, we could expand the proposal along Metzger Street in a high priority area. We can also expand the proposal on two roads surrounding other Somerville schools. We can consider phasing out parking on the sidewalk altogether if the demand proves insufficient. We can consider more permanent furniture like in-ground planters, for example. So the other scenario is if the project is not absorbed or partially absorbed. The good news is that the pavement involved in the intervention consists of interlock pavers, which can be easily uninstalled and repurposed for other projects. The planters and benches are lightweight and designed for easy relocation. And lastly, the mountable curbs could be removed and the area could be seamlessly refilled asphalt again. And that's all.
I think we have like one question, time for one question. If anybody has one.
What a pressure with being the one question.
Yes, Christopher, go ahead and take the pressure.
Yeah, my one question was whether you had taken into account snow and snow removal equipment and actions. In particular, I'm a little worried about the sidewalk furniture being able to survive a major snowstorm and plows, and also how if you're defining spaces for parking spaces, how those get shrunk in the winter with the addition of snow and ice and such things. I'm just worried if the community building all these things and then having them get mushed in one bad snowfall.
Well, these furniture pieces are movable. They're not meant to be permanent in place. So in an event if a snowstorm, maybe they could be out on a playground or inside the school. So I think that would be an easy fix for them.
I will say that I love the idea of having like kids actually build the furniture and like having the opportunity to see like something they can take pride in and, you know, actually their community. The questions about snow, you know, aside. But thank you guys so much. I think we have one more student group. Who should I promote to presenter?
Harish.
Yeah.
Apologies for the black lines. But my name is Harish Krishnamurthy. I'm a first year Master of Urban Design student.
Noor, I'm a second year Master's in Urban Planning student.
And our intervention will be looking at Cross Street. As a mission statement, we kind of see Cross Street as having the potential to serve the multimodal needs of the Somerville school community and keep people safe. And we see that happening through an evolving set of interventions that include a street-long bike and pedestrian treatment, temporary closures of a school zone between Edgerly and East Somerville, and an improved connection to the community path, all of which we'll get into. I know that we're all familiar with Somerville, but for some context, Nora and I began this project looking specifically at the Edgerly and quickly realized that there was this whole network of other adjacent schools. We saw that most of the school population, because of Winter Hill's relocation, came from the Winter Hill neighborhood, but that there was also a significant number of students coming from south of the community path around Spring Hill. And in both cases, the community path, it became a really important piece of infrastructure, but one that we saw as not as well connected as it could be. And that all of the schools had to pass through Cross Street at some point, making both of them and their intersection really important. Through a really small kind of survey that was taken from parents and based on their students, we saw that there was a majority that preferred walking and that overall there was a spread of different modes of transit, but that increasingly those modes of transit were not seen as particularly favorable compared to driving. As many of the other groups did, we conducted a series of analyses. So this one for pedestrians looked at the network of streets around the Edgerly and essentially put a weight on how important they were in terms of getting to and from the school. And so while we see that some of the key connectors such as the Otis Street footbridge and Gilman Street are really important and highly weighted in terms of getting across McGrath, further travel south through Cross Street to get to the community path was actually not that well favored, pointing to perhaps some unfavorable qualities of walking on that street. And then in terms of cycling, we kind of zoom out a bit more. The paths in blue are those that are low stress or kind of preferable for biking conditions, and the paths in red kind of take all the most optimum routes, even those that are not, if not well designed for biking. And what we see is that south of these schools going down Cross Street, you see a decrease in quality, which points to Cross Street not being well suited for biking. Again, the connection to the community path, which doesn't really even show up as a really vital infrastructure, is something that we think could be improved. And to give a sense of scale for how much this would have an impact, we see that currently, if we had all of these routes be optimal for biking, the travel time would be around 8.5 minutes, but as it stands right now, those that we consider safe or kind of designed for biking would almost double that time. And so as a kind of summary, we see Cross Street as in its current conditions as a car-oriented street that backs up, particularly during pickup and drop-off, peak hours. It lacks sufficient pedestrian and cyclist facilities, even though it has a slower appearance or an appearance of a street that would be safe. And it has a relatively unsafe and unmarked connection to the community path as it stands.
We really wanted to ensure that our work here was sensitive to the future of Cross Street, particularly in the context of the two major parallel streets, McGrath Highway, which carries a heavy amount of car traffic, and Glen Street to the east, which is a local access one way each pointing towards Pearl Street. It carries some bike traffic. And Cross Street sees both car traffic and bicycle traffic, and it's also home to a little bit of small retail and service. As far as I'm aware, within the next month, Glen Street is going to become a neighbor way, which is going to further probably decrease car traffic along it and also encourage cycling. So we could potentially see some cyclists choosing to use Glen Street, but some car users moving to Cross Street. At some point, construction will begin on McGrath Highway, which could redirect traffic onto Cross Street. And particularly if those we're going to see higher volumes, we're going to be really conscious of protecting cyclists. But at some point even farther in the future, McGrath Highway is rebuilt with substantial bike facilities, hopefully, providing yet another reason for cyclists to choose to use McGrath Highway instead of Cross Street. And so Cross Street now has an opportunity to fulfill a more pedestrian-oriented niche in light of some of those small businesses and in light of the excellent bike facilities on McGrath and Glen Street. So as it stands, it's a car-oriented street, like we said. Hopefully in the near future, we can turn it into a busy street that still is able to facilitate a better drop-off and pickup through multiple modes, and eventually become a pedestrian-oriented mini Main Street for the community. And with that, we'll dive into our interventions, which consist of three things: a street lawn treatment, a unique school zone in between the Edgerly and the Somerville Community School, and work on the connections to the community path. This is a section drawing of Cross Street, as if you were standing in the middle of the street and looking north. We have 2 parking lanes and 2 bike lanes with sidewalks that are relatively narrow, especially in locations where you have a lot of street furniture or trees, and you get a lot of backed up traffic in these lanes. In the short term, we're proposing replacing a lane of parking with a southbound bike lane. This facilitates the kind of travel that we've heard that some cyclists may use, where they come down on Broadway Street, down, turn onto Cross Street, and then can continue back on the community path. This does remove approximately 60 parking spots, but encourages more bike activity because it's safer. Also provides a bit more of a buffer for the pedestrians on the west side of the sidewalk. But in the long term, as we said, the bike facilities are going to be much better on the 2 major streets to either side. So we're proposing actually reclaiming that space to expand the sidewalk, add some nice landscaping, and create a really nice street that feels like you can walk through your community.
So our second intervention that we looked at was the kind of zone between the Edgerly and East Somerville, and seeing that as a school street, as the previous group has mentioned, they provide a lot of benefits in terms of expanding the public sphere, kind of being a useful space. And we recognize that even now, there are instances where students travel from the Edgerly to East Somerville, and of course, during pickup and drop off, Cross Street becomes really backed up. So in a short-term sort of intervention, we imagine that the portion of Cross Street between essentially Brook Street near the intersection with Bon Air and Everett Avenue, so just ahead of Pearl, taking advantage of the turning point in front of East Somerville, could be temporarily closed off between drop off and pickup, and perhaps during a lunch hour or a certain time of day where kids could use the street as effectively like as an open space, which would be really beneficial as well for the Edgerly, who face limited kind of recreational playground spaces. So there's a lot of kind of benefits in that space as well. Cars would be redirected along Everett and along Brook during those times. In the long run, we see this kind of continuing, but that the zone itself, in coordination with that expanded sidewalk, would become effectively designed as a shared street, which would mean that there would be kind of, it would allow cars in when the street is not temporarily closed, but it would be designed to be slower movement and be effectively a safer space on all times of day for pedestrians. So that might include the design of certain multi-use paved spaces, some landscaping, street furniture, all done in a way that would kind of facilitate multimodal travel through it. We also recognize that we're not traffic planners in any way, but we recognize that this would have a effect on current and future planned bus routes that use Cross Street. So this is a quick kind of understanding of how inbound and outbound bus routes could be redirected onto McGrath or onto Glen to kind of during the times when that street is closed.
And finally, even though we said that hopefully in the future, McGrath and Glen Street will be more optimal paths for cycling, Cross Street still remains the key connection to the community path as it curves up and onto meets this bridge. However, currently there's no clear wayfinding to the community path, and the low stress path, community path, kind of jarringly lets out onto this intersection with the bridge, which is unprotected. You even get some blind spots from the actual infrastructure of the bridge itself. So we're proposing at first just a strategy which essentially extends our community path up and across the bridge. First, we think that we need to control the intersection below the bridge a bit through the use of stop signs, provide raised crosswalks and markings to encourage cyclists to cross there and continue north up on the east side of the bridge. On the west side, you can see that this allows the southbound bike lane to cleanly connect onto the path. Again, encouraging cyclists and pedestrians to use this, and they'll know that the connection is here as well. And in the future, we think that this should be shifted completely to the west side with hopefully a expansion to the sidewalk on the west side, so that there's a much easier path for folks. we would want to encourage cyclists to be crossing on the north side instead, where there's a lot more visibility in both directions. And we also want to make it really easy for cyclists to go from the community path to the Glen Street neighborway, which they can do through Fountain Avenue. So we want to install nice protected bike lanes on both sides of Cross Street just for this extent, so that cyclists can really easily have a fully safe route from the neighborway onto the community path. And here's just an overview of our 3 interventions. Their short-term and long-term proposals. Our street treatment, which starts out favoring cyclists, but then changes to serve pedestrians more strongly. Our school zone in the middle, and then our community path connection down there, which in a rough timeline here, we can see the way that we would want to implement this, recognizing the way McGrath Highway might redirect traffic onto Cross Street and afterwards, when we have the opportunity to turn it into our pedestrian street.
Yeah, it's only a couple minutes. So that's fine.
Yeah. Well, do you still want to take questions for this group? Does anybody have questions?
Okay, I can ask one. Yeah. We had talked about rerouting some of the buses. Were you able to think about some of the turning radiuses for those? Or turning radii, I always get that wrong, but pretty tight corners for Glen. And then I had a follow-up just of considering the Tough Street neighborway. As a connection.
The what street neighborway?
Tough Street. And it's another planned project of the city's. No problem if you didn't. It was just more of it's kind of going along. It involves more permanent construction than the Glen Street this time.
It's right to the south of me.
Yeah, right there. Yeah, we weren't considering it. I think that would be, yet another another reason for us to improve that infrastructure there, right there, connecting the community path to encourage access to Tufts as well. We focus primarily on Fountain just because it connects to Glen Street, which serves East Somerville and also gets us to the early education center. And in terms of turning radiuses, that was a bit out of scope of our work.
Transit planning as a completely separate class.
Awesome. Well, we are at time. I'm very happy that we managed to get through all of you guys. But just thank you so much for being here. It's so fun to hear about all the work that you've been doing and to hear some new insights from people who aren't just like mired in the day-to-day of the streets. So thank you all so much and good luck with the rest of your semester, I suppose.
Tomorrow's the last day of class.
Cool. I think we can say goodbye to everybody online as well. Bye, folks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Zach.
Bye.
How to shout out for Carol.
Thanks again so much for giving us this space. It's really wonderful to be able to have students present this work to community members and people with some expertise, and both in terms of lived experience and you're working in this space. And so thank you so much for having us.
And remember, wherever your career journey lands you, you're gonna have people who tell you you can't do that. The rules don't allow you to do that. The resources don't allow you to do that. The politics don't allow you to do that. Take notes of why. And then figure out a way to work around it to change the status quo. Don't lose that spirit of activism.
That's right. That's it.